The difficult but fascinating lives of intuitive introverts unfold like secret chapters in a book few people ever open. They are the quiet observers of life. Souls who feel the rhythm of the universe in silence, who can sense the unseen motives behind words, and who understand emotions that others cannot even name. Their world is not built on surface appearances but on invisible threads of meaning, intuition, and deep perception. Every encounter, every glance, every sound carries a vibration, a hidden layer, a message from life itself. They don't just see what's happening, they sense what it says means. And that sensitivity, while extraordinary, often becomes their greatest source of pain. From an early age, intuitive introverts feel different. They don't adapt easily to loud environments, shallow conversations, or social games built on ego and competition. While others thrive on noise and validation, they are quietly suffocating in it. They withdraw, not because they dislike people, but because their inner world is more real, more fulfilling, more sacred than the chaos outside. Their solitude is not loneliness, it is their laboratory of the soul. Inside that space, they create, analyze, dream, and rebuild themselves endlessly. Carl Jung understood this. He saw that intuitive introverts live between two realities, the physical and the symbolic. They navigate both effortlessly, translating emotions into symbols and experiences into truths. They live with a foot in the material world and another in the realm of imagination, archetype and dream. This dual awareness gives them vision, but it also makes daily life exhausting. They absorb too much, the energy in a room, the hidden sadness behind a smile, the tension beneath a conversation. Their empathy becomes a double-edged sword, granting them wisdom yet wounding them through overfeeling. Society often misunderstands them. Their silence is seen as arrogance, their solitude as sadness, their depth as detachment. People call them mysterious or distant because they cannot read them like they read others. But intuitive introverts don't seek to be understood. They seek to understand. Their curiosity runs deeper than appearance. They want to know what makes the soul move, what fear hides beneath laughter, what childhood wound created an adult's mask. They are truth seekers, walking through illusions as if they were thin veils. And because they see so much, they often carry a quiet sadness, the sadness of seeing too deeply in a world that rewards superficiality. When they love completely. Their relationships are not casual or convenient. They are sacred bonds of energy, trust, and psychological intimacy. But because they crave authenticity, they struggle to find it. The average relationship feels too shallow, too distracted, too rushed. They need connection that reaches into their core. Conversations that breathe, silences that speak, eyes that listen. Until they find such a connection, they remain alone, not out of pride, but out of necessity. They would rather wander through solitude than settle for half-truths. Their minds are a storm of thoughts, images, and insights. They can see patterns others miss, predict outcomes without logic, and feel the undercurrent of future possibilities. This is not fantasy. It's intuition at work, a higher form of perception that Jung described as the psyche's natural compass. But this same intuition also isolates them. When they try to express what they sense, people call it strange, mystical, or impractical. And so they learn to stay quiet. They become observers, watching the world play its games while they hold their truth in silence. Yet within that silence lies power. The power to understand without judgment, to guide without words, to heal without being noticed. Work and creativity become their refuge. They often channel their complexity into art, writing, philosophy, or any form of deep creation. Through expression, they free themselves from the weight of feeling. Their creativity is not a hobby. It's therapy, a spiritual necessity. In every painting, story, or melody, they deposit fragments of their unspoken world. They create not to impress, but to survive. And in doing so, they produce work that touches the subconscious of others, awakening emotions people didn't know they carried. Their art whispers truths that ordinary language cannot hold. Yet, for all their gifts, intuitive introverts often wrestle with self-doubt. Because their inner vision is so vast, the outer world feels painfully small. They struggle with routine, deadlines, and social expectations that demand simplicity. Their mind doesn't move in straight lines, it flows in spirals, symbols, and paradoxes. They understand too many sides of everything, which makes decisions difficult and life overwhelming. They constantly oscillate between deep conviction and quiet confusion, knowing too much yet doubting if anyone will ever truly understand. In moments of despair, they retreat into the only place that feels safe, the inner world. There, they talk to their higher self, analyze their dreams, and reassemble their broken pieces with quiet patience. Their solitude becomes alchemy. Out of pain, they extract wisdom. Out of rejection, they grow compassion. Out of failure, they build resilience. Slowly, they realize their difference is not a curse but a calling. To live deeply in a shallow world, to feel in a culture that numbs, to see what others refuse to see. And as they evolve, they begin to embody a quiet strength. They no longer fight their sensitivity, they wield it like light. They no longer explain their silence, they use it to listen to the soul of the world. They stop trying to fit in because they were never meant to. They were meant to awaken others, not through noise, but through presence. Their journey remains difficult because it demands authenticity in a world built on imitation. Yet it is fascinating because every struggle hides revelation, every solitude births creativity, and every scar becomes a map toward consciousness. The life of an intuitive introvert is not about escaping reality, but about seeing it through sacred eyes. It's about finding meaning in mystery, beauty in complexity, and truth in silence. It is a journey of integration, of merging the inner and outer worlds into a single vision of depth, purpose, and awakening. Why intuitive introverts live the hardest but most meaningful lives begins with a truth that is rarely spoken. They are born into a world that celebrates noise, yet their wisdom grows in silence. From childhood, they feel an invisible tension between who they are and what society expects them to be. They are told to speak louder, move faster, be more social, more visible, more confident. But their natural strength lies in reflection, in sensitivity, in depth. The world runs on extroverted energy, but intuitive introverts operate on an inner current that flows in stillness, perception, and spiritual awareness. This conflict between the inner and outer world creates both the hardship and the meaning that defines their lives. They see life differently. While most people focus on what is seen, intuitive introverts are drawn to what is hidden. They perceive emotions, motives, and invisible energies beneath words and actions. They can enter a room and instantly feel the emotional temperature, sense unspoken tensions, detect dishonesty, and understand pain that hasn't been confessed. This level of perception gives them profound empathy, but it also becomes a burden. They absorb too much, carry too much, and feel too much. Their heart becomes a vessel for other people's unprocessed emotions, and without solitude, they slowly begin to drown in them. Carl Jung described intuition as the function that perceives possibilities, symbols, and the unseen structure of reality. For intuitive introverts, this function is dominant. It shapes their entire experience. They move through life guided not by logic alone, but by a subtle awareness of patterns and meanings. They often just know things, who to trust, what direction to follow when something is wrong, even when they can't logically explain why. But this very intuition that connects them to truth also disconnects them from normal life. They live half in the physical world and half in the psychological one, translating emotions into archetypes, relationships into lessons, and pain into purpose. Their minds are like deep oceans, still on the surface but filled with powerful currents below. Every thought ripples into another. Every feeling opens into a labyrinth of reflection. They analyze not only what happened, but why it happened and what it means for the soul's evolution. This introspection gives them immense self-awareness, but it also breeds overthinking, self-criticism, and emotional exhaustion. They struggle to rest mentally because their consciousness never stops digging. Sleep doesn't quiet their minds. Dreams become another layer of exploration, filled with symbols and hidden meanings that demand interpretation. Relationships are both sacred and challenging for intuitive introverts. They crave deep, soul-level connections, not casual companionship. They want to be seen beyond the surface, understood without words, loved without conditions. But such connections are rare. Most people cannot meet them in their depth. They find their intensity overwhelming. So, the intuitive introvert often becomes the giver, the listener, the healer, the empath, offering understanding while receiving little in return. They are the ones people run to when the world breaks them, yet few stay when the introvert themselves needs to be held. This imbalance quietly wounds them, yet it also teaches them about the nature of unconditional love. In their solitude they rebuild. Silence becomes their medicine. It is in moments of stillness that they begin to hear their own soul again, the whispers beneath the noise of other people's expectations. They read, they write, they meditate, they create. Through solitude, they transform their pain into insight, their confusion into art, and their sensitivity into wisdom. What the world sees as withdrawal is in fact regeneration. They retreat not to escape life, but to return to it with clarity. Each quiet hour is an act of purification, removing the dust of chaos from the mirror of their mind. Their lives are hard because their consciousness is vast. They cannot stay numb, cannot blindly follow, cannot live on autopilot. Every lie they tell themselves becomes unbearable. Every inauthentic act feels like a betrayal of the soul. They crave purpose like air. They cannot find satisfaction in comfort. They are drawn toward growth, even if it hurts. For them, life is not about success. It's about meaning. They would rather face inner storms than live in pleasant emptiness. Pain for them is not an enemy, it is a teacher. Every heartbreak, every rejection, every failure becomes raw material for transformation. They often walk alone because few people can understand the language of their inner world, but solitude gives them access to something sacred, the direct experience of their own consciousness. In the silence of isolation, they begin to sense a connection to something larger. What Jung might call the collective unconscious, or the soul of humanity. They realize that their suffering is not personal but archetypal, part of the shared human story. Through this awareness, they start to see beauty in their struggle, a divine pattern unfolding through every shadow and wound. Their intuition makes them visionaries. They are the philosophers, artists, writers, mystics, and thinkers who translate invisible truth into tangible form. While others chase pleasure, they chase meaning. While others seek validation, they seek understanding. Their creativity is born from suffering, yet their suffering becomes art. They take the chaos of emotion and shape it into wisdom that helps others see themselves. Their lives become a mirror, reflecting the unconscious soul of the world back to itself. Still, the journey is not gentle. Because they live so deeply, they experience everything more intensely: joy and sorrow, love and loss, hope and despair. Their highs are transcendent, their lows are devastating, but in both they remain awake. To live as an intuitive introvert is to live consciously, to refuse numbness, to choose awareness over comfort, It means walking through darkness willingly, knowing that every descent reveals new light. And perhaps that is why their lives are so meaningful. Because they don't just exist, they evolve. They don't just survive, they awaken. They embrace the full spectrum of human experience, allowing life to sculpt their soul into something authentic and timeless. The world may not understand them, but it needs them. For they are the quiet keepers of truth, the ones who remind humanity that depth is not weakness, that feeling deeply is not a flaw, and that sometimes the hardest life is the one that reveals the most sacred kind of wisdom. The secret life of intuitive introverts is a world that exists behind closed eyes and silent expressions, a landscape few ever see because it cannot be spoken, only felt. To the outside observer, they appear calm, distant, mysterious, perhaps even indifferent. But within them, entire galaxies of thought, emotion, and intuition are in constant motion. Their silence is not emptiness, it is density. Every pause, every stare, every retreat hides 1,000 interpretations, 1,000 emotions intertwined with memory, vision, and meaning. They are the keepers of inner worlds that operate on frequencies beyond ordinary awareness. From the moment they awaken to themselves, intuitive introverts sense that they perceive reality differently. Where others see facts, they see patterns. Where others hear words, they hear the emotions that hide behind them. They interpret tone, energy, hesitation, all the invisible signals that reveal truth. Their minds are antennas tuned to subtleties that most people overlook. This heightened sensitivity gives them insight, but it also burdens them with awareness they never asked for. They cannot turn it off. Every conversation, every environment, every encounter imprints upon them, filling their consciousness with impressions that must be processed later in solitude. Carl Jung described the intuitive function as a mode of perception that looks beyond the immediate data of the senses. For the intuitive introvert, this perception is like a sixth sense, a deep psychic lens through which they interpret life. They sense connections that defy logic, feel the future approaching before it happens, and read between realities as if guided by an unseen current. This makes them excellent observers of human nature. Psychologists by instinct, philosophers by temperament, mystics by design. Yet the same gift that allows them to see the truth often alienates them from others who live more comfortably on the surface. They inhabit two parallel worlds, the visible and the invisible. In the visible world, they move quietly through social structures, jobs, and expectations. But their true home lies in the invisible, the inner landscape of imagination, symbolism, and intuition. They don't just think, they see thoughts forming like constellations. They don't just remember, they relive memories as emotional tapestries. They don't just imagine, they enter their imagination as if it were another dimension. This depth of perception is intoxicating and exhausting at once. It fills them with wonder but also with isolation, for few can follow them into these depths. Their need for solitude is not a preference, but a survival instinct. Every interaction drains their energy because they don't merely engage. They absorb. They take on the moods, emotions, and unconscious material of those around them, processing what others ignore. Solitude becomes their cleansing ground, the only place where they can release what isn't theirs and reconnect with their own essence. In isolation, they reorganize the chaos of experience into order and meaning. They think deeply about the structure of existence, about patterns in human behavior, about the psychology of the soul. In silence, they feel most alive, because it is the only environment quiet enough to hear the voice of their intuition. Intuitive introverts are seekers of truth, not comfort. They are fascinated by the invisible mechanisms of the psyche, archetypes, dreams, shadows, and spiritual forces. Their curiosity often leads them into philosophy, psychology, art, and mysticism. They are not content to simply exist. They must understand why existence feels the way it does. Every experience becomes material for inner analysis. A stranger's glance can trigger a reflection on human vulnerability. A fleeting dream can awaken an entire essay on symbolism. A heartbreak can open a lifelong exploration into the nature of attachment. For them, nothing is random. Everything is a message from the unconscious, and yet this intensity isolates them. The world around them thrives on small talk, speed, and distraction, while their souls move slowly, like deep rivers. They crave conversations that touch the essence of being, not the weather, not gossip, not trends. They long for moments of raw authenticity. Eyes that listen, hearts that understand, silences that connect. When they cannot find such connection, they withdraw, often misunderstood as cold or distant. But their withdrawal is not rejection, it is preservation. They must protect the sacredness of their energy, for too much exposure to the surface world erodes their depth. Their emotional life runs deeper than they show. Every word spoken to them echoes long after the conversation ends. Every emotion is felt in layers, every decision weighed against moral and spiritual values. They are often haunted by empathy. The pain of others feels like their own. They carry invisible scars from feeling too much, from caring too deeply, from seeing too clearly. This emotional gravity can lead them into periods of melancholy and existential reflection. But within that darkness, they often discover rare forms of insight. Pain, to them, is not just suffering. It is a signal, a doorway, an initiation into greater awareness. Creativity is their natural language. Because they find the external world too limited to express their internal complexity, they translate their experiences into art, writing, music, or philosophy. Every creation is an attempt to make the invisible visible, to give form to feeling, to externalize intuition. Their creativity is not driven by ambition but by necessity. It is their way of decoding the symbols that arise from within. What others see as beauty, the intuitive introvert sees as revelation, the materialization of something sacred that words alone cannot carry. They are often drawn to the mystical side of life, sensing that the universe itself speaks in metaphors and dreams. They see coincidence as synchronicity, pain as transformation, silence as communication. They understand that everything external mirrors something internal, that the outer world is but a reflection of the psyche. This awareness gives them a spiritual orientation, even if they are not religious. They live guided by intuition, trusting the subtle inner voice more than the loud external noise of society. To live as an intuitive introvert is to constantly walk the border between worlds, between solitude and connection, between logic and intuition, between human fragility and divine awareness. It is a life filled with contrasts, clarity and confusion, pain and transcendence, withdrawal and creativity. It is not an easy life, but it is profound. Their journey is not about escaping reality, but about understanding it through symbols, through silence, through inner revelation. They live in secret, not because they hide, but because their reality is made of things too deep, too vast, too beautiful for ordinary perception. Carl Jung on Intuitive Introverts reveals a world that exists beneath the surface of ordinary awareness. A realm of thought, feeling and intuition that most people will never see. To Jung, the intuitive introvert was not just a personality type, but a symbol of the human psyche's mysterious depth, the part of us that looks inward for truth instead of outward for validation. These individuals are often misunderstood not because they are unclear, but because they see too clearly. They live through intuition, not logic, through meaning, not appearances, through silence, not noise. Their power lies in what others cannot grasp, the ability to sense the invisible architecture of reality. Jung believed that the intuitive introvert lives in constant dialogue with the unconscious. Their attention naturally turns inward, seeking patterns, insights, and archetypal symbols that connect personal experience to universal truth. They are drawn toward the mystical, the philosophical, and the symbolic dimensions of life. They perceive not just what is, but what could be. Potential futures, hidden motives, and deeper meanings behind every experience. This sensitivity makes them visionaries, but it also isolates them. To live with such perception is to walk through a world that often feels blind. They see the invisible threads between people, sense energies behind emotions, and recognize the subtle language of dreams and intuition that most dismiss as imagination. Because their mind is wired for inner exploration, intuitive introverts often feel like strangers to the outer world. They watch rather than participate, observe rather than react. Jung understood this detachment as a form of protection. The intuitive introvert is not indifferent. They are overwhelmed by the intensity of life. Every environment imprints upon them. Every emotion lingers like an echo. Every interaction requires interpretation. Their energy is consumed by processing, turning experience into understanding, turning emotion into insight. Their solitude is not isolation, it is alchemy. In silence, they digest the chaos of the outer world and transform it into meaning. Being misunderstood becomes their constant companion. Their calmness is mistaken for coldness, their depth for detachment, their quiet for weakness. Yet behind that stillness is a storm of perception. They see motives people hide even from themselves. They recognize pain disguised as humor, insecurity dressed as arrogance, longing masked by anger. This ability to see into others can be both a gift and a curse. It makes them healers, counselors, and artists. But it also makes them weary. To see truth everywhere is to carry the weight of awareness in a world addicted to illusion. Jung observed that intuitive introverts are often out of sync with their time. They belong to the future rather than the present. Their ideas, feelings, and insights seem premature, too advanced or too strange for the collective consciousness around them. Society rewards extroversion, speed, and conformity, while the intuitive introvert moves through intuition, contemplation, and authenticity. This mismatch breeds alienation, yet it also fuels originality. Because they do not fit into the world, they create new ways of seeing it. Their solitude becomes a laboratory for innovation. The more they are misunderstood, the more they are forced inward, where they discover their truest voice. Jung's writings suggest that this misunderstanding is not accidental. It is part of the intuitive introvert's spiritual task. They are meant to endure the discomfort of being different, so that they can learn to rely on their inner compass, rather than the collective opinion. Their power comes not from being understood, but from understanding themselves. Every moment of rejection or confusion pushes them deeper into their psyche, where they encounter archetypes, dreams, and insights that reveal the structure of the soul. They come to see that the difference is not a defect, it is a design. The world needs those who perceive the unseen, even if it cannot yet comprehend them. The hidden power of being misunderstood lies in freedom. When no one fully understands you, you are free from the prison of others' expectations. The intuitive introvert learns to move through life guided by their inner vision, not external validation. They learn to trust the quiet knowing that arises from intuition, a knowing that speaks through feeling, symbol, and subtle resonance rather than through words. This inner trust becomes their source of strength. While others seek direction from authority, they seek it from dreams, synchronicities, and the whispers of the unconscious. Their path may be lonely, but it is authentic. It belongs to no one else. They also carry within them a natural empathy that transcends logic. Because they sense the hidden emotions in others, They often act as healers, not through deliberate effort, but through presence. People feel safe around them without knowing why. Their calmness dissolves anxiety, their silence invites reflection. Yet this same empathy can become exhausting. They absorb the pain of others as if it were their own, feeling emotions that have no name. Over time, they must learn to protect their energy, to distinguish between what belongs to them and what does not. This boundary is not selfishness, it is survival. Their creative expression becomes the bridge between their inner and outer worlds. Whether through art, writing, music, or quiet insight, they translate the language of intuition into something others can understand. Their creations often carry a haunting beauty, a blend of melancholy and revelation. Through creativity, they reveal what cannot be spoken directly, the truth that exists beyond rational comprehension. They give voice to the unconscious. Jung saw this process as individuation, the journey toward becoming one's whole self by integrating the conscious and unconscious mind. For intuitive introverts, this process is their life's purpose. Every misunderstanding becomes material for transformation. Every rejection becomes a mirror reflecting another layer of the self. They are constantly refining, shedding illusions, and moving closer to their authentic center. Their loneliness teaches self-sufficiency. Their silence teaches perception. Their emotional depth teaches compassion. Over time, they realize that being misunderstood was never a tragedy, but a necessity. A space that allowed their intuition to grow untouched by the noise of conformity. To live as an intuitive introvert through the eyes of Jung is to walk the path of the inner mystic. It is to translate chaos into meaning, pain into wisdom, solitude into awareness. It is to carry light through shadow without needing recognition, to perceive truth without demanding agreement, to love the world even when the world cannot comprehend your love. Their hidden power is not in being seen, but in seeing, deeply, quietly, endlessly.